The fall of Kingsley. Kingsley Okafor was the kind of boy people noticed, whether they wanted to or not. He was the only son of Chief Damien and Lady Ifeoma Okafor, one of the wealthiest families in Lagos. The Okafor estate sat like a palace in the heart of Banana Island, wrapped in marble floors, gold accents, and the kind of luxury that made the air feel different. Kingsley went to an elite private school where students arrived in Range Rovers with tinted windows and nannies trailed behind like shadows. But even among the rich, Kingsley stood out, for all the wrong reasons. He was arrogant, loud, and unapologetically condescending. "You call that a phone?" Kingsley sneered at Timmy, one of his classmates, pointing at his outdated Android. "Do you press it with stone too? Maybe I'll ask my dad to buy you something better. I feel embarrassed just looking at it." The others chuckled nervously, not because they thought Kingsley was funny, but because standing up to him was social suicide. He picked his friends based on status, designer brands, and how much money your parents donated to school projects. No one questioned Kingsley because no one could touch him. Not the teachers, not the principal, not even his parents. Chief Okafor believed in rewarding power, not correcting flaws. If his son was proud and brash, it only meant he would succeed in a ruthless world. "You're going to rule, my boy," Chief Okafor would say as he poured himself another glass of scotch. "The world respects power, not pity." And Kingsley believed him. Kingsley's 18th birthday party looked like a movie set. There were fireworks, celebrity performances, imported ice sculptures, and enough champagne to start a river. The Okafor mansion had been transformed into a glittering paradise. Influencers begged to be invited. Everyone wanted to be seen with Kingsley, even if he hardly acknowledged their existence. "Kingsley, this party is wild," shouted one of his classmates. Kingsley barely looked up from his phone. "Is it? I've seen better." It didn't matter that his mother had spent weeks planning it. It didn't matter that dozens of staff were still cleaning up his mess. Kingsley saw everything and everyone as disposable. Even his parents had become little more than background noise in his world of luxury and entitlement. But that night, as he stood on the balcony overlooking the estate, something flickered in him. A strange emptiness. The laughter below felt fake. The compliments hollow. Was this all there was? He brushed the thought aside. He wasn't one for deep feelings. Emotions were for the poor, for the weak. And Kingsley was neither. Or so he thought. It happened 3 weeks later. Kingsley was in school, bored in economics class, texting his driver to bring him lunch from his favorite sushi place, when the principal walked in. "Kingsley Okafor, please come with me." He rolled his eyes. "Why?" "It's urgent." The students whispered as he followed the principal to the office, still texting on his phone. But as they turned the corridor, he noticed something unusual. The principal's face was pale. His hand shook slightly. When they entered the office, 2 men in suits were waiting, one in a black blazer with the seal of the Nigerian police force. "Kingsley, I'm sorry to tell you this," the principal began, voice trembling. "There's been an accident." The words dropped slowly, like stones in a well. "Your parents were involved in a car crash on their way to Abuja. A truck lost its brakes. There were no survivors." Kingsley didn't respond. "What?" The world seemed to pause. The air left the room. For the first time in his life, Kingsley's voice failed him. No, you're lying. My dad doesn't die. He owns hospitals. My mum, she has pilots on standby. This can't happen." But it did. And just like that, the boy who had everything lost the only 2 people who ever knew how to handle him. The funeral was grand, just as Chief and Lady Okafor would have wanted. Luxury black cars, white roses air-freighted from South Africa, guests in expensive mourning clothes. Every political figure that mattered was in attendance. People cried, whispered, took selfies behind dark shades. Cameras rolled. Headlines blared. But Kingsley sat in the front row, frozen. His face was dry. His eyes blank. Everyone expected a dramatic display. Some wailing. Something befitting a boy who had just lost his parents. But there was nothing. He couldn't cry, couldn't feel, because he still didn't believe it. He kept waiting to hear his father's voice calling out in command, or his mother's perfume wafting past him on the breeze. But the wind was empty. The voices were gone. After the ceremony, Kingsley went home, to a house that now echoed. The silence was brutal. No more servants bustling about. Most had been let go. The accounts were frozen, and pending investigations into Chief Okafor's business dealings meant that assets were locked. Kingsley wasn't even allowed to use the cars. His father had always kept things under his sole control. He never trusted others, not even family. And now there was no one. His uncles, once smiling and full of compliments, vanished like mist. Family friends who called him Prince Kingsley now sent polite texts and moved on with their lives. He was 18, legally an adult, and legally alone. The real descent began slowly. The school allowed him to finish the term, but whispers spread like wildfire. The rich boy is broke. They seized his house. He's selling his shoes. People gossiped like wolves circling a wounded, studied him then sighed. Oya, sit down. I go give you small. He ate like someone who hadn't tasted food in a year. Each bite felt like swallowing his past. The restaurant wasn't fancy. The walls were cracked, the chairs didn't match, and the food was served in chipped plates. But it was the best meal he had ever had. Afterward, he offered to wash dishes. The woman, Mama Abney, laughed. You wash. Your hand fit touch sponge. I'll try, Kingsley mumbled, eyes downcast. It was the first time he had ever spoken with humility. She allowed him to stay. Gave him a mat in the back of the kitchen, beside the storeroom. And thus began Kingsley's new life, not as a prince in a mansion, but as a dishwasher in a roadside buka. For weeks he scrubbed pots, swept floors, ran errands. He burned his hands, slipped in soapy water, fought rats in the storeroom. He learned to live with body odor, hunger, and ridicule. But something strange began to happen. For the first time in his life, Kingsley began to notice people. Real people. The young girl who cleaned the floor had dreams of being a nurse. The old man who bought umla every Thursday used to be a banker before a stroke ended his career. The boy who served drinks walked 4 miles each day just to help feed his younger siblings. Kingsley listened. And he learned. He watched how they supported one another. How they shared. How they prayed before meals. How they laughed even when they had little. He realized how empty his old life had been. How blind he had been. He had confused wealth for worth. Arrogance for strength. Isolation for superiority. One night, as he scrubbed the last pot, he broke down and cried. Deep, shaking sobs that rose from a place even he didn't know existed. Mama Abney found him there. You day all right? He wiped his tears quickly. I didn't know life was like this, he whispered. I thought I was better than everyone. She sat beside him, her voice soft. That's the thing about life, my son. Ego humble you. Sometimes not to punish but to teach. And when it finished teaching, you go rise. Kingsley looked at her, eyes swollen, heart breaking, and for the first time healing. 6 months passed. Kingsley had become a different person, not just in appearance but in soul. His shoulders had dropped their arrogant arch. His eyes, once sharp with scorn, now carried quiet reflection. The boy who once mocked waiters now was one. He no longer dreamt of private jets or Gucci bags. Now he dreamt of meaning. One rainy evening, as he wiped down tables, a stranger walked into the buka, a man in his late 50s with a walking cane and a steady gaze. He ordered quietly and sat at the corner. Kingsley served him his meal with a small bow. Enjoy your food, sir. The man studied him for a moment. What's your name? Kingsley. The man's brow lifted slightly. Kingsley Okafor. Kingsley froze. Yes, sir. The man nodded slowly, then pulled an envelope from his jacket and slid it across the table. Your father trusted me. I was his lawyer. I've been looking for you for months. Kingsley stared at the envelope like it was a ghost. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten, in his father's voice. My son, if you're reading this, it means I am gone. I've lived many years thinking I could protect you with money. I gave you the world but failed to prepare you for the real one. Life is not built on power but purpose. Not on pride but people. In a vault I secured long ago is money for your future. Education, stability, hope. But it is not yours until you have worked for a year in service. Not in luxury. Not under your name. Just as a boy among boys. A man among men. If you pass this test, you'll have more than wealth. You'll have wisdom. Be better than I was. Your father, Damien Okafor. Kingsley wept as he read. Not because of the money, but because he finally understood his father's silence. He hadn't been abandoned. He had been prepared. The man placed a hand on his shoulder. Are you ready to rebuild? Kingsley looked around the buka. At the people who had unknowingly saved him. At Mama Abney watching with proud eyes. No, he said. Not yet. I still have 6 more months. And he stayed. A year later, Kingsley stepped into a new life. Not with grand announcements, but with quiet purpose. He began his university education through a scholarship he earned himself. He chose sociology and community development. He volunteered in youth programs, mentored street boys, and started a foundation in his parents' name, not to flaunt their legacy, but to redeem it. His story spread, first through whispers, then interviews, then national headlines. The boy who lost everything and found himself. People were amazed, inspired, humbled. At a leadership conference, he told his story with tears in his eyes. I was rich, but I was poor. I had money but no meaning. It took losing everything to find out who I really was. The streets taught me more than all my years in luxury. My fall saved me. One of the audience members was Timmy, the classmate he had once mocked. After the speech, he walked up to Kingsley. You remember me? Kingsley smiled softly. Yes, I do. Timmy nodded. You've changed. Kingsley looked him in the eye. I had to. Life made sure of it. They shook hands, equals at last. Years passed. Kingsley Okafor became a name associated not with riches, but with redemption. His foundation grew across the country, providing mentorship and scholarships for underprivileged youth. But he never returned to the arrogance of his youth. He still washed dishes when visiting Mama Abney. He still removed his shoes before entering homes. He still bowed his head when speaking to elders. People asked him why. And he would say, because I once lost everything. And in that loss I found what matters. I don't serve because I'm less. I serve because I know what it's like to be broken, and what it takes to be whole. One morning he was invited to speak at a school, a very familiar one. As he stood before the students of his former elite high school, he looked into a sea of young faces, some proud, some insecure, some just like he had been. He told them his story, not the polished version but the raw one. He ended with these words. Don't let your comfort blind you. Don't mistake privilege for character. Be kind. Be humble. Because life has a way of showing all of us, sooner or later, that we are not better than anyone. We are only blessed to do better. There was silence, then applause. But more than that, there was reflection. Somewhere in that hall, another Kingsley may have begun to change. Wealth may open doors, but humility opens hearts. Arrogance builds walls. Compassion tears them down. Life will not always go as planned, but humility opens hearts. Arrogance builds walls. Compassion tears them down. Life will not always go as planned, but in the breaking we find our becoming. And sometimes, losing everything is the only way we gain what